Hey guys, usually when I come on here and do a web recommendation, it's usually for a fan fiction or original story on places like Demonica.com and other places. But also, I come on here and give web recommendations for fellow YouTube channels or other places. But in this case, we're going to talk about stories that you can find on places like DeviantArt, fanfiction.net, and elsewhere. And these are my top five, my personal top five picks for the kind of stories that even if you're not really into it too much, but you want something to kind of get you into the mood of Halloween with its strangeness and its fantasy-like elements and its WTF kind of situations, its weirdness, its unusualness, then these top five stories, in my opinion, are basically the best way to go. So the first one I want to talk about is one that actually Jaquelidor, who's actually a girl, and I'll just call it Jackie for short for right now. But the first story, the number 5 story, is one that she began after she started doing Metamorphosized to Malleability, or at least she started around the same time, a little afterwards, or even before. But she's put more focus into the Metamorphosized story than she has this one, and the story series I'm talking about is called Becoming Unlimited. And recently she uploaded the 6th chapter or 6th part in the Unlimited series. And it's a very unusual kind of story. It really kind of goes in different directions at times. But you can tell that she has one direction she wants to try to focus on right now with the story series. And that's kind of like a more darker, more twisty, like, oh, you didn't see that coming kind of deal. And, oh, what's going to happen next after this twist kind of deal. So, she's going in that kind of a direction because, when she started doing the Becoming Unlimited series, it started out lighthearted and fun at times. Basically, the story series focuses on a character called Isaac, or Izzy for short. And he ends up, just like Briella in the Metamorphosized series, he ends up being, I guess you could say, doused or infected with this formula that gives him Clayface, and Clayface, which is a DC Batman villain or anti-hero, is a heavy influence and inspiration for this character in the story, but gives Izzy, Isaac, if you will, the abilities of a Clayface, very similar to what Briella gets in the Metamorphosized series. And I'm sorry if I'm stumbling on my words a little bit. I'm doing this without a script and, off the top of my mind. But like I said, he ends up getting the same abilities, and basically, just like Briella did at first, I believe, just like Briella did at first when she got similar abilities, if not identical abilities, he starts going through all the normal routines and, moves and shapes and everything people would try out and test when they discover that they've got these new abilities, either it's temporarily or permanent. But the way he discovers at first is what he considers to be a dream. So during his dream, if you will, he ends up going through all the different changes. He shapeshifts into inanimate objects. He melts down to the floor into a puddle on the floor, where he basically thins out and becomes transparent, if not indistinguishable from the floor, to the point that he has a line of something like, so this is what's like being, or something along the lines of, I think the line is something I think it's kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's along the lines of, so this is what it's like to be the floor, or something like that. And again, he's doing all this during his dream of having these powers, even going to the part that he shapeshifts into a woman, an actress, and basically starts acting like her and flirting like her and all that. It isn't until in this first story, which is the same name as the story series itself, Becoming Unlimited, the first part that is, that when he wakes up, he realizes it wasn't a dream, and he's a little surprised, a little unsure at first, but then he starts getting more comfortable, like, wait a minute, I could have fun with this. This could be an interesting scenario. I could have some fun. So he goes through all the unusual shapeshifting tests and abilities just like he did in the dream, but more so. And again, it's just a really interesting beginning, intro, first chapter of the story series. But then as we start to progress throughout it, because there are 6 parts, the story starts to really go in a direction. You start seeing a side of Izzy Isaac that you didn't think you didn't know about, from the first chapter. You find out, you kind of get a hint about it, but then you find out more so as the later chapters appear, that, because he's divorced and everything from his ex-wife, he's unsure of exactly where he stands, from a romantic standpoint, and mostly from a preference standpoint, because he's kind of like wavering, like right in the middle of bi and non-bi or whatever. So, he's kind of like in that, in that scenario, in that situation right now, to the point that when he turns into a woman and gives in to being a woman, if he's hit on, if you will, by a guy, like I think there's the second chapter is called Working Unlimited, and it's his boss, who's not, the best kind of boss you would want, especially when it comes to women. Basically, he's the kind of boss that will give a woman what she wants, like a promotion or a raise, if she does him a certain favor, if you know what I mean. So basically, when Izzy turns into an exact copy of a woman that this boss has seen, Izzy gives into the female urges of lust and, making out and sex and all that. And it just builds upon in each chapter. In each chapter, you start getting hints that, something's going on, that, he's kind of, basically with Izzy, he's trying to balance out this new ability, and he's trying to have fun with it. But, he starts to get to a point where it gets a little confusing for him. Like in the 3rd chapter, it kind of ends with him basically coming home. He shapeshifts into basically the lead female from Ghost in the Shell. Yeah, he shapeshifts into her from what I read. And when he gets home, he just expands into like a balloon-like size and then blows up. He just explodes and everything. And there's just like these little squirmy worm pieces of him just scattered about that just are squirming before they, finally settle still and then squirm back into the middle into a blob. And then basically he creates this unusual, he basically shapes himself into basically a blending of, let's just say, the regions of both a male and a female. I'll put it that way. And he does something unusual with that you have to read the story to kind of see what I'm talking about. And then we get into Family Unlimited, which is another chapter, and we get introduced to his family a little bit. And basically, when he gets home from that, he starts having these urges again, and to the point that in Family Unlimited, we get discovered, especially towards the end, the ability that was always, I don't know if the real Clayface in the Batman, if the actual Clayface villain in the Batman stories has the ability to do this, but I know there are other characters that are similar that have been able to do this in other forms of media. I just don't know about the Clayface one. But anyway, basically, when he get at the end of the Family Unlimited story, it gets to a point that he's so indecisive because he's attracted, because like I said, he's kind of borderlining, like right in the middle of being bi and not bi. So when he was the female lead in Ghost of the Shell, Makato, I can't pronounce the name right, he basically gets attracted to this character called Tristan. And Tristan obviously accepts Makato, Izzy, in his female form, as she is, or as she/he is. Anyway, to get to the point here, at the end of Family Unlimited, it ends with him testing out his abilities. He's getting these urges and all that. arousions and these urges, if you will, to the point that he splits himself in two. Not entirely yet, but basically what happens is he shapeshifts into Tristan, then into Mikado, if you will, and then there's a point towards the end where he splits like right down the middle. Basically, what Jackie put in there as a description was he gets to a point where it's like one side of him becomes Tristan, one side of him becomes Mikado, and then a fusion or what I can't pronounce the word. It's a Fissure. It basically is a fission, I guess you could say that's what it's called, splits right down the middle and up to the torso. You have one side being Mikado and one side being Tristan, and both sides are making out with each other, trying to, get it on, to the point that at the end, all of a sudden, the tither band, as it's called, splits apart, and it actually separates them into two separate individuals, that at the end of the story, go to Izzy's room, cuddle together, and by cuddling they end up melding back together into Izzy, but just as a gurgling mud puddle or something like that. And then it gets even more stranger in Dating Unlimited, because Izzy, again, borderlining on either he's bi or not bi, is going out to spend time with Tristan. And this is when you start discovering that the personalities he's created with the shape-shifting ability are starting to take on a life of their own. And again, we kind of get a hint of that at the end of the previous chapter before this one. So you start noticing that the personalities he's created are trying to take on a life of their own. To the point that Mikado, her head pops up on the side of Tristan, not Tristan, but Isaac's body, and she basically tells him, hey, this would be easier if it was just me going to spend time with Tristan than you. In other words, she's trying to convince him, hey, look, I know you're kind of confused, but you got to make a decision. Is it going to be you that goes with Tristan, or is it going to be me? So, it gets to, so you start noticing those abilities, those moments, I should say. And then at the end, he basically shows that he could shapeshift into even armored vehicles. So he shapeshifts into a tank because a certain region of his needs release, if you will. And he basically becomes this armored tank to allow that release, if you will, to happen. So that was basically chapter 5, which was called Dating Unlimited. Now, like I said, it's 6 chapters. The first one was called Becoming Unlimited. The other was Working Unlimited. The third was Exercising Unlimited. The fourth was Family Unlimited. The fifth was Dating Unlimited. And now we get to the more recent one that went up, I think, yesterday, called Stalking Unlimited, or Monday, if you will, this past Monday, called Stalking Unlimited. Although I think, according to what Jackie put in her notes, she wanted, when she replied to a comment by another DeviantArt user or reader or subscriber to her page, she said she wanted to try to rename it or number it differently or something. But basically here is where things really take a turn for like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Because basically, again, he starts having these urges like, according to what we read in this chapter, this recent one, him and Tristan had agreed to go and it'd be okay to see other people, but there's this side of him that's starting to be like, is he that's obviously becoming jealous, and he starts disguising himself as all these different people, from babies to other men, other women, to inanimate objects, to animals, stuff like that. And he ends up creating this new persona called Cindy, where she dubs Cindy later on, and she gets attracted to, or is hit on and attracted, and vice versa, by a waitress at a restaurant who basically sees how he is reacting and seeing something. And, this waitress offers to takes Cindy back to her place to talk about it, because obviously there's also an attraction. And you could pretty much guess what happens from there when they both end up at the apartment. And this is where, again, Izzy gives this new female persona the name of Cindy. So, what happens at the end, though, is really interesting. It's like, if you follow Jackie's works and you follow this story along with the Metamorphosized series, when you read the ending of Stalking Unlimited, you'd be like, wow, I didn't see that coming. But this is something that if you've seen these kind of stories before, you've seen them done many times over in different media, if you will. But what happens is he goes home, he starts, again, shape-shifting himself into something that we saw at the end of, I think, was it Exercising Unlimited, like I mentioned earlier. But then he looks in the mirror and he says, and he starts thinking to himself, what am I doing? Because all of a sudden he's being indecisive. It's like something's not right. It's like he can't make up his mind of what direction he wants to go in. And this opens the door for the two female personalities that he's created, Mokata and Cindy, to appear and basically kind of get on him for being like, look, you need to make up your mind. What is it going to be? And they basically get into a shouting match where they try to, basically the shouting match, because Mokata is trying to convince Izzy, and then Cindy, who also pops up on one side. It's like, okay, so basically this is what happens visually, from what I can understand. It's like his Mokata on this side, his Cindy on this side. And what happens is they end up arguing with each other and basically stating and trying to convince Izzy to choose one person over the other. Like for Cindy, it's to choose that waitress she fell for at the restaurant, or that she fell for at the restaurant. Mokata is like, no, Tristan is who you're meant to be with, or who we're meant to be with. So anyway, it gets to a point that when they try to separate to kind of get him to go one way or the other, it basically becomes very similar to what happened at the end of basically Family Unlimited. Basically, it gets to a point that as they're stretching, most of Cindy's body's coming out this way, most of Mokata's body's coming out this way, and Tristan's mouth is just like a tether, just like that tether at the end of Family Unlimited that bonded Tristan and Mokata, at the waist before splitting apart and separating them. Well, basically the same thing happens here. It gets to a point that it's now Izzy that's right in the middle, and he's trying to tell him to please stop, but as soon as he says please, all of a sudden there's a gasping noise, and then pop, and then pop, all of a sudden they're separated, and they're two individuals. They're two separate individuals, and Mokata's like, oh, thank God, I'm free of this, coward. I don't have to deal with him being indecisive. And Cindy's in agreement, and basically they both call the truth, and they both agree that maybe not touching each other right now is probably a best option to go with, because I think Cindy remembers, even though she wasn't in existence until this recent chapter. She kind of recalls that the last time Mokata and Mokata and Tristan, or the other part of Izzy as Tristan, touched each other, cuddled together, that they melded back into Izzy. So what's interesting about the ending is they both agree to a truth, because they both understand now, hey, we're our own individuals now. We still have the powers we still have the shape-shifting Clayface abilities that Izzy had, but and we can both now have what we want. The thing they have, but here's what's interesting: they both acknowledge that the one thing they cannot do is get in contact with each other physically, because they know that will lead to them melding back together and Izzy coming back. And the way it's described at the end of the story is basically when they pull, really pull to the point that he gets like into that tether taunt, if you will. Basically, as Jackie describes it, he gets basically pulled out of existence. And again, it's a really interesting story. And like I said, if you've followed Jackie's works on Jackie's works, Jaquelidor's works on DeviantArt, then you'll probably be saying the same thing to yourself, like, wow, I didn't see that part coming, especially if you're following this story and the Metamorphosized story. You know, you might say, wow, I didn't see that one coming. However, you know, to me, I definitely see where this is going to go. I could see basically by the next couple of chapters, you know, I think what Jackie's going to do with these next chapters, she's going to let Cindy and Mokata be their own individuals for a bit. But in the next few chapters, a lot of things are going to happen. Like the family's going to wonder where Izzy went. And yeah, they could play with the idea that Cindy and Mokata could shapeshift into Izzy, so there wouldn't be no suspicion. But I think when they start doing that, just to throw off the family, that's when Izzy's going to start coming back to the surface. And then in the end, they're going to realize, okay, fine, you know, we'll get back together, we'll become you again. But since you know how to do the separation deal, if we both have individual dates, you know, with Tristan and this waitress, you're going to have to split apart to let us do that. So I think that's what we're leaning towards, to where they're going to do maybe a chapter or two, where Jackie's going to write a chapter or two of, you know, them being their own individuals. But as we get later on in the chapters, basically I think what's going to happen is Izzy's going to start resurfacing, because, like I said, to kind of throw suspicion off from the family of his whereabouts, they're going to have to shapeshift into him, you know, on occasions, and that's going to, like I say, help him to be resurface and come back to the living, come back into existence. But yeah, you should definitely check this one out. It is worth your read, even if you're not into this kind of stuff, but and everything. But it's definitely worth the read. Trust me. Trust me. You will have nothing. You will not regret reading this. Believe me. Okay. So number 4. Number 4 is it's only a 2-parter deal, but a lot of the stories that this individual does is very similar. But these are the 2 I think you should check out, at least the first one. And that is the Stretchiest Mobian Alive. And this is done by Chaotic Lover 2. I don't know what the whereabouts are right now. I'm pretty sure they're just taking a hiatus because they got other stuff to work on and focus on. But basically, the Stretchiest Mobian is an interesting story, because basically what happens is Sally ends up getting elastic powers, if you will. She ends up getting these elastic woman powers, to where as the story progresses, she can actually shapeshift her body into any way she wants. Like, she can shapeshift it into a sexy voluptuous style to kind of distract or throw off someone like Sonic, which she does do in the story. She could actually reduce her body down into a puddle of near liquidation, basically kind of like a slime-like puddle, to get through the tiniest cracks. She can shapeshift herself into different sized balls and objects if she has to. And she can even shapeshift herself into different clothing, or even disguises or outfits for others to wear. So, and she can even shapeshift herself into other characters. And it's a really fun one, because, you know, Chaotic Lover goes all out with this. Chaotic Lover 2, that is, goes all out with this. And it gets to a point that later on in the chapters, other characters end up being affected as well. They end up getting the same abilities. Like Amy gets it, Lupe gets it, or Lupe, the wolf, leader of the wolf pack, she gets it. The twins, the wolf twins, they end up getting it. And what's interesting about when Amy and Lupe getting it is they end up fusing together temporarily when they end up getting it, and then later on they are separated, but they still have the same abilities that Sally gained. So it's a really fun one. I would check it out. It's at fanfiction.net. I'll provide a link if I can get it in the description. But definitely check that out. I mean, if you ever wanted to see the Freedom Fighters or any of the Satayam or Archie Sonic characters do unusual stuff that you feel, hey, if the show had continued or the comic had continued, you could see them doing that, then the Stretchiest Mobian alive is the one for you. It really is. All right, so at number three, we have What Dreams May Become. This is done by grapehyacinth. She also has some books over at Amazon. She's actually selling at Amazon, physical and digitally. And they do play off of her stories that she first developed here on DeviantArt, like this one, What Dreams May Become. And I think, let me check, I think she's at the 18th chapter, I believe. I'm not really sure. Let me double check that. I think she might be at the 18th chapter. But these are really fun stories because these are the kind of stories that I could honestly see, and I've talked about this before, I could see being adapted into a Netflix or Hulu original series because they're that good. Because and the reason I'm saying that, and the reason I say that is because it's not just, the main thing that the stories are about, which is, having the power to be able to become anything you want to become, whether it's inanimate or something else or whatever. It has an ongoing story to it. It has an ongoing continuity to it that I believe from a viewer perspective would really get somebody invested. Again, like I said, it would really get people invested, if you will. In fact, let me see where she's at here. Okay, the most recent one she did was number 17. Excuse me. And I think that may have been, let me see, as I scroll down here. That was, whoa. Oh, that was last year. That was the beginning of last year. That was over a year and a half ago. And the reason we haven't seen any more besides that is grapehyacinth is working on other things. Like I said, she has a Amazon store as well. She actually has an Amazon store as well. As a matter of fact, let me look up her link. Yeah, it's FM Isaacs, FM Isaacs, and the store. Yeah, FM Isaacs. She has two stories. She has several stories. You can get them on, actually 2 stories that you can find on online at fmisaacs.com, or you can find them at Amazon. And they are known as The Family of the Fox. It's a trilogy. She actually only has 2 books out right now. She's working on the 3rd one. I think she is. Yeah, she's working on the 3rd one. The first one is called Family of the Fox, and the other is called Trial of the Fox. And like I said, you could find those at bookstoread.com, Kindle, or basically, Kindle, which is Amazon. You can find those there. And she has another one planned for next year. And then she has one called Taunting Fate, which she has planned for 2022. That's if nothing comes up or anything. So, that's why we haven't seen much when it comes to the What Dreams May Become series. Because she's focusing more on that, which is a good thing because at least she's expanding her horizons and she's taking her love for the fantasy of shape-shifting, of people being able to have the power to shape-shift into anything or anyone they want. And she's taking it to that next level, just like a lot of people are taking certain other powers that might be more adult-oriented, or abilities that might be more adult-oriented. They're taking them to the next level and making a full career out of them by making books by publishing books on them and everything. But yeah, the What Dreams May Become series, she actually began this. Actually, I think, if I can look it up. She actually began this. Let me see when she began. Hold on. She actually began the first What Dreams May Become chapter on May 22nd, 2014. So she started this about 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago almost, and she's still working on it at times. But when your main source, when one of your main sources of income is working on a book that you're gonna that you're gonna publish physically and digitally, that can be sold at places like Amazon or books to read .com, Kindles and all that, Audibles. Then you're gonna put primarily all your focus on that than you are anything else. So yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's definitely why we haven't seen many of the not many, but we haven't seen much continuation on it just yet. Although I know probably on the side when she's takes a day away from working on the Fox trilogy, that when she takes that day off from working on the Fox trilogy, that she's also working on she's kind of dabbling a bit with the What Dreams May Become story as well. She's also done some other things as well, like with me, I've commissioned her for a lot of stories, which she dubbed Potion, Place, and Gina. And let's just say some of the stories I commissioned her for could be a little unusual, but it is in the realm of fantasy to where when you read them, you can be like, oh wow, this is actually pretty good. I could see this probably visually as a show or a special or whatever on Netflix or Hulu. Now, what's interesting is her story actually inspired another author called the Potion Place Gino one, that is, actually inspired somebody else, and that is Tile Grey Wolf. And he did a spin-off called Ultimate Potion Vacation or Ultimate Vacation or something like that. I think that's what he did. I think that's what he did. Hold on, let me check. She should have it on here. She should have it on here. Hold on. Oh no. Let me see. Come on. I know it's in here. I know it's in here. Come on. It's got a lot on here, but I know it's in here. Okay. Here we go. We got him. Okay, I think we got it here. Hold on. Ultimate Potion Vacation Time. That's what it is. It's called Ultimate Potion Vacation Time. And this was done by Tile Grey Wolf, thanks to the inspiration of the Potion Place Gina stories that grapehyacinth had done, through commissions from people like me, at times mostly me, and others. So, yeah, that was created. But again, besides that, you really have to check out the What Dreams May Become series that she's done. It's really good. It focuses on the two main characters. It focuses on is called Roman and Caroline, not Caroline, but what's her name? I almost messed up there. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Let me see. Here we go. We'll get to this part. Corey. It's Cora or Corey. That's Corie. Basically, it focuses on them, and just like the other stories I've mentioned in the previously here, it starts out a little fun, lighthearted, and then it starts to get more dramatic, a little comedic at times, but dramatic at times. It's a balancing out to the point that the last time we left off, as far as I know, Corey was pregnant with Roman's child. And what's interesting about Roman is he's actually older than Corey, but there's a reason why he's older, because he's a shapeshifter. And he can change his appearance any way he wants. And basically, Corey or Cora prefers the younger Roman that is always around. The other thing is he's able to share his shape-shifting abilities with her to the point that she becomes so infatuated at times that she doesn't want to be anything but she doesn't want to be basically she wants to be anything but human at times. She even likes to kind of incorporate what she becomes. Like there was I think what was it chapter 5 and 6 or something like that. Grapehyacinth allowed the people to kind of message her and suggest. Okay, sorry about that. But anyway, like I said, yeah, she basically the last time the thing was left off, as I try to adjust this, make it a little bit more straighter. But last time it was left off, as far as I know, basically Cora was pregnant with Roman's child. Roman, like I said, is actually older than her, but because he's a shapeshifter, as I mentioned before the interruption, and he's able to share his abilities with her, she prefers him as the younger Roman that she finds attractive. But again, sorry for the interruption there, guys, and let me just the camera again. It kind of gets a little faulty or kind of crooked a little bit when that happens. But like I said, anyway, Roman shares his abilities with Cora to be able to shapeshift into anything she wants or whatever. And there are times that what I was saying before the previous interruption, before this interruption, basically Grapehyacinth, when we got to chapter 5 and 6, because I think we reached a certain number of subscribers or viewers for her, she said that basically she would allow the people that followed her, to contribute ideas to be put into chapter 5 and maybe 6 if it goes a little longer, or if she gets too many ideas. So I, along with other people, contributed ideas. And one of the ideas I contributed was to have Roman change Grapehyacinth into a house. And what's interesting about this is Grapehyacinth, not grape. What I'm saying is, so I'm still distracted off the interruptions there. But what I was saying is that Roman, Grapehyacinth, basically one of the ideas I contributed to Grapehyacinth for Roman to use to transform Cora in chapter 5 and even 6 was that of a house. And basically what's interesting about some of the transformations that Roman puts Cora through is she embraces it to a point that she doesn't want to be, again, like I mentioned earlier, she doesn't want to be anything else but what she became. She doesn't want to be human anymore at times. I mean, there's even a line that gets added in where, Roman's walking, after Roman's turned her into a house, and he walks through her to kind of show her that she's all house now. She's just a house. She's got an upstairs window, stuff like that. There's basically a moment where she asks Roman, can you live in me? And he's like, I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, that's a good idea or anything because of, what's coming up with you. And she basically says, well, why not? I am a house after all. So yeah, basically from a story perspective, earlier on and even in the later chapters, when she gets turned into something by Roman, or they turn into something together, separately, or to merge together, she embraces being what she becomes. And like I said, it's because she doesn't want to change back into anything else, mostly human, because she loves being what she has become. And that's basically what the title kind of implies. It's her dreams, what dreams may become. is basically because her dreams are becoming reality through the powers that Roman gives her. So yeah, it's really an interesting story. I'll provide a link down below so you can check it out, along with links to her 2 stories that she has on Amazon through Kindle and all that you can order and enjoy there. Because like I said, she, along with other people, are taking the love for a lot of these shape-shifting stories, these fantasy stories, these stories with some being more adult oriented with the abilities by the character utilized, and they're taking them to that next level to be published. So definitely check that out. So at number 2, I just mentioned it. Like I said, I mentioned it at the beginning of this countdown. I will mention it again. We're talking about metamorphosized to malleability. And yes, I don't have to really say much about this that I haven't said already. But it is very interesting. It's fun. Like I said, just like with a lot of the stories I just mentioned, it starts out very lighthearted and fun, and it kind of stays that way at times throughout the course of it. Especially even after we get past the 100th or into and past the 100th shift/chapter of it. Just check out the recent video I did on it. I'll provide a link to that. And again, I'll provide a link to the Metamorphosized to Malleability. Another story done by Jaquelidor. Again, really great. And the recent few chapters have really been, developing the characters, to the point that, again, it becomes very obvious, like I said, in the previous video, it becomes very obvious to me that what the 150th shift/chapter possibly planned to be determined, if you will, for a release around New Year's Eve in a couple of months. I definitely feel that that's going to be around the time between now and then, maybe in the middle, but mostly towards then, that Briella is going to find a way to finally grant Crystal the same abilities as her, so they can have some very, some very adult, if you know what I mean, fun with the powers that they both have and share. So, it's going to be an interesting trip towards that 150th shift/chapter. So again, I'll provide the link down below. Again, not really much to say after what I said in the last video, so check that out. And then, of course, now we're on to number 1. And number 1, I know minor-alterations is going to love this one. And it is called Demonica. Yes, the Demonica series at number 1. And all I could say is you have to check out this series. Also check out Mr. Internet Man's Mystic Makeovers series as well. He has webcomics, one-shots, and all that, which inspired minor-alterations to do this series. And it's really cool. It's really interesting. Basically, and I've talked about this before, but I'll talk about it again here just briefly. It centers around, of course, Mr. Internet Man's character, Demonica/Veronica, and minor-alterations character, Ruby Walker, to the point that Ruby also gains these abilities, and we're left kind of on a cliffhanger, where Ruby seemingly still has the abilities, even after they're supposed to just go away after a short time. She seems to still have the abilities. And it's really interesting. And again, I know I use that word a lot here, but it's really interesting. It's fun. The story is a great read because basically she, Demonica/Veronica wins Ruby over, convinces Ruby, hey, I am one of the good guys. And even through her other persona, which is the sultry Monica, she wins her over to the point that as the sultry Monica, she shares her abilities with Ruby that at first, like I just mentioned, were only supposed to be temporary, but they end up seemingly at the end of the recent chapter become permanent or have become permanent. And it's really fun. It's really fun and everything. Mr. Internet Man even did a story called Walk on the Wild Side, which was a web comic where both of them, where basically, again, Demonica shares the abilities with Ruby, turns them both into slime girls, and then as they get really into it, and she shows her what fun she could have doing it, it ends up in both of them basically melding together, merging together, and then basically fusing together into basically a featureless, nameless entity that only cares about the body she now has and the powers that come with it, which you kind of tell, as I mentioned before in a previous video, is Ruby's influence coming into play, because we find out in minor-alterations stories, as well as a little bit of help by Mr. Internet Man, that Ruby really likes the ability to melt down into a liquid puddle of goop, remain that way, evaporate, shapeshift into any slime-like entity or whatever. She just enjoys it, and you could tell that towards the end of the Walk on the Wild Side webcomic, her influence is coming in to play. So anyway, though, yeah, Demonica, that series, you have to check it out. Minor-alterations also has another one very similar called The Model and the Symbiont. Check that out. But number one, you have to check out which Model and the Symbiont, again, is a good read, and it's developing in a huge way. It ties into another story that they're doing called Selena, which is obviously based in the Men in Black universe. So, check that story out. Again, the recent chapter on that really, gets your attention, really makes you wonder what's next. And, yeah, that's all I could say about Model and the Symbiont, because it started just a little while ago, like several months ago. Well, Demonica has been going on for the past 1.5, 2 years. So, yeah, check out. So, yeah, number one is the Demonica series by minor-alterations. And to tie in, check out the Walk on the Wild Side story arc, a webcomic that Mr. Internet Man did to kind of collab along with minor-alterations on this. So, really, that's about it, guys. So that's basically my top 5, in my opinion, top 5 stories you should check out. Fantasy, fan fiction stories. To kind of get yourself in the Halloween mood, if you will. But also the kind of stories that if you're into the unusual, the fantasy, the WTF, the weirdness factor of stories, then these are the ones, in my opinion, you need to check out. Links, hopefully, will be provided in the description box so you can check them out as, time goes on. But until next time, guys, thank you all for watching. Really appreciate it. And I am out. You have all a good day, good evening. Stay safe. Peace out.